All right, Braden, the NBA season is over. God's gift to the game of basketball, the Boston Celtics are the world champions. And they just knock out Dallas in 5 games. If I hadn't gone to an NBA Finals game, they would have swept it, is what I'm convinced of, because I went to Game 4. And now, obviously, Luka had caught a bunch of heat in that series, and that is only going to get louder after the Mavs ultimately lose the series. And is it deserved? I'm in kind of a gray area here, Braden.
Okay.
Like, he deserves some heat. He does, especially for that defensive performance and how he showed up in the big games. Like, that's how we measure our stars. You know what I mean? And if the Celtics don't win this series and Tatum puts up the same numbers, which were fine, he's getting killed too. You know? And I know he's playing with an injury or two. Like, that is very clear. But in the NBA discourse, when do we give the stars the benefit of the doubt for that? Ever? Like, we never give them that. You know what I mean? And I'll give the Tatum example again. Tatum 2 years ago had a shoulder injury in that final. He couldn't shoot it the same way. But he also didn't show up, and that's what we remember. So Luka, what's going to live on are the stats and the Windhorse rant and, him bitching to the refs. So I'll ask you first before we kind of dive into the numbers a little bit. Does Luka deserve to have heat for the Mavs losing this series?
I think he deserves some of the heat, like you said, but I think most of the heat should maybe go to Kyrie.
Kyrie sucked in those games.
Kyrie did suck.
Like, really, really sucked. It had one good game in the series, I thought. Well, Game 4, he was fine. I mean, everyone was just kind of fine and good, right? Game 3, he had 35. I thought he made some poor shot selections at the end of that game when Luka had fouled out. But he also made some pretty good plays, a couple of alley-oops as well. So that kind of evens out. He has one good game. Luka, I'm looking at the numbers, and I remember coming into this series, I think I said it on this show, if you can keep Luka under 30 for one of these games, that's a win. And that's how any team would look at it through the postseason. You average 34 a game in the whole postseason. So to keep him under 30 is really not an easy thing to do. And in 3 of the 5 games, they kept him under 30. In Game 1, he scored exactly 30. So again, I know the numbers look fine, right? He averages 29 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists.
Yeah.
But all of those are steps down from his overall postseason numbers. And he doesn't score 35 at any point in the series, which I know that it's like inflation in the finals, right? 35 feels like 45 any other round, but he didn't get there. And we laud him as the second best player in the NBA because he can put up monster nights like that. And the reason why the Mavs were in the finals were because he put up monster nights like that. And when you take the monster nights out of Luka, you beat the Mavericks. You really do. And so for Kyrie to not step up at all is also a problem to me. Like, that's to your point, Braden. Like, he needs to have something come down on him too. But the fact is, Luka's the best player on the team.
Yeah.
He's one of the very best players in the league. He's one of the most gifted offensive players we've seen, maybe ever. And sometimes those guys can will their team to victory. He could not.
Yeah.
He's also 26.
He's also the face of the franchise. So it doesn't matter. Like, let's say Daniel Gafford goes 1 for 8, scores 2 points.
He probably did at some point.
He probably did. People aren't going to be as mad at Daniel Gafford for not stepping up. They'll just see that the Mavericks lost and assume that, Luka just probably didn't try hard enough, you know?
Yeah. What say you? You watched the series.
I thought it was interesting that Game 4 was probably Luka's best overall game.
Yeah.
And then Game 5, he was right
29,
back to
5-5, but
Right.
didn't play most of the like the last quarter and a half. Yeah.
In my head, Luka probably he probably heard or saw the Brian Windhorst, the rant, and he had that good game to shut him up. And then Game 5 was like, okay, I done it. I could prove that I could do it at the biggest stage.
Mm-hmm.
I can maybe slink back down.
And next time we might win it.
Yeah. And
What we talked about this a little bit last week. What did you make of the Windhorst examples, like in his rant? I mean, he talks about Luka's defense. He talks about Luka bitching to the refs. I know pretty much every superstar does that, but was it as detrimental to the team as Windhorst was making it out to be?
his defense, yes. He was just kind of
man.
it was real bad. Just
Matador
standing up.
Luka, baby.
Yeah.
Show and go on
like-
defense, not great.
He looked like me on the football field.
Pre or post cancer?
This is post.
Okay.
Right, immediately
That's not
post.
good for Luka.
Immediately
Not good for
post.
Luka.
And his bitching, you said that most superstars do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to get a superstar whistle, you have to, I don't know, have won a major award, I think.
Probably. Yeah.
Or a ring, or I don't know.
Probably. And I think the difference was, and there were very tangible examples of this in Game 3 when he fouled out, that's where Windhorst did it, was him on the ground selling a call or bitching about a call.
Back-to-back possessions, too.
And the Celtics coming down and scoring, like actively hurting his team by doing that. So I think Windhorst makes some great points in there. He does say that he's the reason the Mavericks were losing, which I don't think was true. I think he was the reason the Mavericks were there, and the reason they were losing was because of the Celtics, and the Celtics being a better team. But he just wasn't used to a team being able to throw 3 or 4 guys to cover him. And Charles Barkley said it before the series. He said, Boston's got 3 or 4 guys that can cover Luka, and Shaq laughed at him. He said, they do not have 3 or 4 guys that can cover Luka. And in that same breath, he said, I'm picking Dallas. And I was like, you know what? I mean, I was, pensive coming into that series, but I was like, well, Chuck is right.
Yeah.
Dallas has had the tougher road to get here no matter what. Sure, absolutely. But Boston was the nightmare matchup for Dallas for that reason. They had 4 guys that could switch onto him and play physical with him. And maybe the only one of the starting 5 that I wouldn't have thought of was Al Horford. And we pointed out those Al Horford numbers after Game 1 where Luka was 1 for 8 against him and had a 3-pointer blocked against him. But yeah, you talk about Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown got most of the series against him, and even Jason Tatum can cover him. All 4 of those guys. I think Hauser had some decent possessions on Luka. Not that he could cover him, but you know what I mean? Like, to get him in a pinch, to get him on a couple possessions, worked for the Celtics. And you heard it in that mic'd up in Game 5, where Brown was like, anytime Luka's in there, I'm in there. And once Luka gives it up, he's not getting it back. Bring the ball up if you want the ball. And he was backing it up, Jaylen Brown, which is I think the biggest reason he won Finals MVP. So all that to say, Luka did not have a patented Luka series. I don't think he lost the series for them. And I think this brings about a bigger question for the Mavericks. Because every year, just about, maybe not Miami last year because we knew what Miami was, but these teams that get to the finals for the first time in a while and they lose. What do we hear all the time? Oh, they'll be back.
Yeah.
We heard about it with the Celtics in 22. That was correct. We heard about it with the Suns in 21. That's not going to happen. We heard about it before that Cavs-Warriors thing. It was all the time. Oh, that team will be back. Especially in this era of parity that we're all of a sudden in the NBA. 6 champions in 6 years. I don't know that I can sit here and say the Mavs are going to be back. Like, in the very near future.
How come?
Because, I'll say this. I do think Luka is going to get them back at some point.
Okay.
And I think he's going to win championships. We're also potentially 2 years away from his actual prime, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And so why I can't say that right now is I look at this series with the Celtics, and there was no runaway MVP in the series, which I think is a testament to how great and deep the Celtics are. And I look at Luka and Kyrie. Kyrie did not play well in Boston. Luka's numbers overall were fine. Again, 29, 9, and 6. So I say that to say you didn't lose it versus your 1 and 2 guys. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum didn't just destroy Luka and half of Kyrie. Where you lost it was 3 through 9.
Yeah.
Because your next guys were P.J. Washington and Derek Jones Jr. and Derek Lively, and theirs were Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Kristaps didn't even play half of it. And, Horford and Sam Hauser gave you good minutes.
Peyton Pritchard
gave you good half-court shots. Like, these guys, even, Xavier Tillman has a game. The depth of the Celtics, which is what, ironically enough, these ESPN analysts, including Udonis Haslem, were saying was the Mavs' advantage. Those were the guys that made it a big difference in this series, that made it a 5-game series instead of a 6 or 7-game series. So when I look at that, I'm like, the Mavs have a lot of moves to make. Okay, P.J. Washington's a nice player, but this is one of my favorite topics and discussions. Can he be the third best player on a championship team? Probably not. No. And if I did say, okay, P.J. Washington is the third best player on a championship team, what else needs to be there? You would say you've got to have 2 other Hall of Famers ahead of him, and you've got to have one be a top 3 player in the league, which is what Dallas had. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, they weren't anywhere close in this series. So you've got to make some moves to fill out that 3 through 8 anyway in your rotation. And there were a couple of games in this finals, I think game 2 specifically, where Jason Kidd played 11 guys in the first half.
Ooh.
The finals. You need to know who your 8 or 9 guys are. We're not throwing out experiments in the finals, which is what he was doing. And so the Mavs need to make a ton of moves to bolster that up, and they're right against the luxury tax here. They're right against the cap. They don't have a lot of money they can move around. They'll need to do some gymnastics to bring in some reinforcements. And I just don't know that they have the flexibility this year to do that, and maybe the next year too. Because as good as the P.J. Washington trade ended up being for them, it's kind of hit or miss with the moves they've made the last couple of years. You talk about the P.J. Washington trade, which kind of flipped their season around at the trade deadline. Well, they had to trade a guy in Grant Williams to go and get him. Mm-hmm. Grant Williams, who they gave a 4-year, $50 million contract to, and traded him halfway through year 1 and had to eat some of that. Like, that's the, I know the Mavs have been a well-run organization for 25 years here, but the last couple have been shaky. With that, obviously Kyrie, that was a big gamble.
Yeah.
And it ended up working. It's absolutely worked. I will also say, as I always say, things never end well with Kyrie, no matter what organization he's in. So you exhale every year you get through with him. But this is a team that tanked the last week of the season last year because they were gonna be a play-in team. They overachieved this year. This doesn't necessarily feel like a run of greatness in the West for Dallas. Does it feel like the beginning of the Luka prime? Yes. And that's why those are two weirdly contrasting things here. So as a team, which we do have to say, team, because Dallas might have had the 2 best players in that series, and they lost in 5 games.
And it's also not the Dallas Lukas,
Right. I mean, you saw it in the series.
Mm-hmm.
They did. I mean, to hold him under 30, that's a win. That's like holding a lot of guys to 12, right? Like, that's a huge win for you defensively. And they were hunting him every time down. Just about. I mean, they used actions against him all the time. One of the other reasons why nobody ran away individually for the Celtics in the Celtics series was they just used their matchups, and a lot of that was against Luka. He has to become a better defender. He just has to. I mean, and this was no secret. The Mavs usually could, in this postseason anyway, were able to do enough that they were able to overcome that. But, I mean, you look back at the last time they went to the conference final, which was an even worse team that Luka was carrying there against the Warriors. They hunted him too.
What year was that?
22.
That was 22?
22, yeah. But I could see in the future Luka, like, changing his game. I think we will, because it reminds me so much of Kobe Bryant. Obviously a different start to it because Kobe had Shaq, and they won 3 straight titles, and they were pretty dominant. But they were kind of in the wilderness a little bit in the West after Shaq left, and they were wondering, can Kobe be the alpha that people think he is? And he wins the MVP in 08 and gets outplayed by both Pierce and Garnett in the finals that year, and the Lakers lose as favorites. And then they won the next 2 because Kobe really took it upon himself to become a better defender, which is what Luka needs to do too, to take on the best player on the other team and realize that he has got some all-world teammates that he can get involved. I mean, probably the best center in the league at the time at Pau Gasol, and Derek Fisher even, a good role player, and getting those guys involved and making them better. Luka can elevate a team, can make a team overachieve, but he hasn't really made his teammates better. And that was the same thing with Kobe for years. And then he figured it out. So I'm not saying Luka can never do it, but he's got some things he's got to work on here, even as an all-world, all-time great offensive player.
And he turned the ball over 7 times.
He did do that a lot. Yeah.
Game 5, which is
Game 2 was his best game, 32, 11, and 11, and shot almost 60% from the floor. He also had 8 turnovers.
8 turnovers.
Like that's the thing. I mean, the Celtics, when you're going up against a guy like Luka, and it's a team assignment to defend him, you're looking to win one big category. And you might not know what that is going into the game. But, you hold Luka to 19 points. That's almost unfathomable. That's a huge win in the points category. In game 1, they held him to 1 assist. By far the lowest he's ever had in his playoff career. That's a major statistical win. Game 2, it was the turnovers, so, and any game he's shooting under 50%. Game 3, he shot 40%. That's a win again. And it was something that Luka led up every time. And you lose those games when you don't have role players. You lose those games. So I don't know, and the Mavs don't even have their first-round pick this year.
Oh.
So I look at the future of this team. Obviously, Luka's going to be an all-timer. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. I really like Derek Lively. I think he's going to be an awesome rim protector in this league. You've got 1 more year, Kyrie, maybe 2. I think it was a 3-year deal. 2 more years of Kyrie.
Maybe.
Right, at most. That's a fair thing to point out.
I think if things go south next season, he's, as Kyrie is wont to do.
Always, man. Always.
Give me to, I don't know. Where would he want to go?
Who knows? I mean, it's a flavor of the month,
Give me the Nuggets.
man. Like, it's a flavor of the month at that point. So I just can't sit here and tell you right after they lost the 2024 finals that, oh, yeah, they'll be back. 25, 26, one of those, they'll be back there. I just don't know because I think Denver's set up for the next couple of years still. Oklahoma City is ahead in their rebuild. That's pretty big. I think Minnesota is going to be a team that's there for the next year or two. Beyond that, with Rudy Gobert, I don't know. But they are well set up. And those teams, specifically a Minnesota, actually has more flexibility than the Mavs do right now. That's the thing. The Mavs are really going to have to see some guys go in order to make some money moves to get a supporting cast in here. You can't run it back with PJ Washington being your 3rd best guy, I think.
Who even would be available this offseason? I don't know who's.
I don't know. I mean, LeBron.
LeBron to the Mavericks?
Paul George. Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know. And usually with these teams that are rounding out championship rosters, I mean, we saw the Celtics do it last year for sure. Butler too, yeah. Is they had flexibility and they might have overpaid a little bit, whether it be on the trade market or in contracts, for these key kinds of role players. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think they did overpay, but we'll know that better in hindsight. But when you're able to make moves for Drew Holiday, for Porzingis, for Derek White, and extend all of those guys, that's what it is. So, yeah, I mean, we throw those names out there, LeBron and Paul George. The Mavs probably don't need something like that. I mean, obviously, guys like that would help. But if you're able to bring in three pretty good role players, mm-hmm. like who have been there and done that, you know, obviously Drew Holiday's more than a role player. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, I think. But to be able to bring guys who fill holes the way Drew Holiday did for a Celtics team, that's what you got to do. And you've got vet min contracts and mid-level exceptions. That's about all you've got to work with right now, unless you start making some moves and seeing some guys out. Mm-hmm. So.
We are Rogue Media Sports.